Once you've pulled enough paper that you have run out of felts, then you'll need to press your paper. So you'll want to take your post or your stack over to the press and slide your post into the slot underneath the blocks of wood. And then you'll want to slide in as many boards as you can fit on top of your felts. Also, you'll need to carry the plexiglass piece underneath your felts over to the paper press with another piece of plexiglass underneath it because it's starting to crack right now. So I'll have to replace that. So just to reiterate, at the bottom of your stack you have a piece of plexiglass, then you have your felt with all of your paper sandwiched in between it, then you have a couple of or maybe 3 boards of wood, whatever you can fit, and then you have that kind of heavy press component mounted from the springs on top of that. Then you'll take this black rod that's pinched on one end and you will tighten that little knob to the right until it doesn't go any further. And that will seal the chamber so that when you put the other side of the black rod into that round hole and start pumping, your mechanism will start moving downward and pressing your paper. So you'll just pump this by hand and you can see the water is oozing out of the felts at this point. And you will just keep doing that until the press, you're using basically a car jack here and it can only go so far. So you'll start to see it slipping or not going any further on the shaft, and then you'll have to just wait. I like to wait at least 5 minutes between each pressing, and then after that 5 minutes you will use the black rod on the small end and open up that little knob by turning it to the left, and that will release the pressure on the press. And that at that point, because you've pressed the paper more, you can actually insert more wooden boards, and those should be in the paper making room that you're in. And then you can repeat the process, and that will allow you to press more water out of your paper. So I think we started with 3 boards and then pressed it, waited 5 minutes, opened the jack or loosened the jack, added a board, pressed it, waited 5 minutes, and added 1 more board, and then let it sit another 5 minutes after pressing that again. All in all, it's good if your paper is pressing for 20 minutes or more so that you really get most of the water out of the paper that you can. So after waiting 5 more minutes, we can now turn this to the left, and it will shoot water out every time you do that and make kind of a fun sound. And again, that releases the jack, and you can maybe lift a little bit upwards to help the springs loosen, and then you can start removing your wooden boards. And at least right now we have them piled up on the cinder blocks in the paper making zone. That board that is closest to the felts, make sure you put it face out so that it can dry. There, I'm realizing that I put it on facing the wrong way, and now the damp side is facing out. All the other boards should be dry. And then you have your post that is nice and pressed. It's much smaller than it was when you started. And you can transfer that out into the print studio for the next step. And now you are going to transfer your pressed damp paper to a drying stack. So you'll pull off a layer of felt, and then really gently you will start with a corner and grab your wet sheet of paper and you'll transfer it over. So the sandwich I have going here is cardboard, and then blotter, and then interfacing. In this case, you see when I picked up the felt, it kind of pulled the paper. So you might want to be careful and double check that it's not kind of coming off with the top felt when you do that. And then you'll want to just carefully drape the paper down. And in this case, I have some wrinkles, so I'm going to do my best to fix them without tearing the paper. You can see some paper maker's tears in that sheet on the left there. Then once you've transferred 2 sheets of paper, you will complete your sandwich. So in this case, we have the blotter closest to the paper, but as you can see, it has a bit of a texture just from repeated use. And so it's also acceptable if you'd rather put the interfacing closest to the paper. And this is sort of the texture of the interfacing. It's a little bit more like that stuff that they line box springs with. So if you want to put that closer to the paper and the blotter paper adjacent to the cardboard, you could do that instead. But then you'll just you can see the interfacing a little bit better on the cardboard here. But you will just keep building these sandwiches with a layer of blotter and interfacing, and then you will transfer 2 more sheets of paper, and then add blotter and interfacing, add the cardboard, and continue like that. Here you can see the difference between a thicker sheet of paper and a thinner sheet of paper, which may have been like the moment that pulp was added to the vat in the paper making process. But it'll just make a sheet that's a different thickness, and the thinner ones are a little bit harder to transfer. Once you have transferred all of your sheets, also make sure that you transfer the stack on top of a piece of wood so that it's easy to move. Bring it into the darkroom and put it on this table that is right in front of you as you enter, and make sure the corrugation is facing where you will put the fan. And then put another piece of wood on top of the stack to distribute the weight, and then put 2 litho stones on top of the stack. Those litho stones can be left on that table when not in use, but please do not put them on top of either of the other tables in that darkroom, because they have glass tops, and so you don't want to put heavy rocks on them. Then you'll plug in the fan and make sure that it's blowing through that corrugation, and leave your paper there to dry for a couple of days. If you need to make more paper, then you can just take your damp felts back to the paper making space and continue pulling sheets with them. If you are done making paper, then make sure to hang your felts to dry. You should primarily hang them over the lithography sink, which is where I am now. There is also a clothesline behind me in front of the windows, which you can use if you have to. Be mindful of what the felts are hanging over. I don't want them to hang over the roll of newsprint that's on the wall, because it will warp the newsprint. And if there's something else underneath where you're hanging that looks like it might be affected by water, then please don't hang there. Once the felts are dry, it is your responsibility to take them down, stack them up, and clean them of paper debris. You can use that black bristled brush to catch the paper fibers if there's a lot on a given sheet. If you don't clean the debris off of your felts, it will stick to your new paper. So here's our new gray paper that has purple paper pulp stuck to it from a previous batch of paper. So that's why you might want to avoid that. Lastly, you'll want to stack up your felts with the other drying paper stack and those kinds of things over near the entrance to the paper making room.